Right now, while you're watching this video, Norway is quietly pulling billions of dollars out of the United States. Not millions. Billions with a capital B. The Norwegian krone just hit its strongest point against the US dollar in 3 years, and the world's most powerful sovereign wealth fund is debating whether to abandon American investments entirely. This isn't just financial news. This is a seismic shift in global confidence that directly impacts your purchasing power, your retirement accounts, and whether America remains the world's safe haven for wealth. In January 2026, the US dollar collapsed below 10 Norwegian kroner for the first time in years. Just 2 years ago, $1 bought you more than 11 kroner. Today, after hitting a shocking low of 9.63 kroner in late January, it's hovering around 9.8. That's a currency crash in slow motion, and Norway is leading the exodus. The phrase echoing through trading floors from Oslo to New York is chilling: sell America. But here's the mystery we're going to unravel today. Why would Norway, a NATO ally and longtime partner, suddenly lose faith in the American economy? And more importantly, what does Norway know that you don't? Stay with me because by the end of this video, you'll understand the hidden math behind currency collapse, why your dollar is losing value while you sleep, and whether the so-called American dream is becoming a financial liability. I'll be in the comments for the first 2 hours after this drops to answer your specific questions about protecting your savings in this new reality. The dollar's fall from grace. Let's establish the baseline. For decades, when the world got scary, money flowed to America. Economic crisis in Europe? Investors bought U.S. Treasury bonds. Political instability in Asia? The dollar strengthened. This phenomenon had a name: the flight to safety. America was the financial fortress where wealth went to hide. But something fundamental broke in January 2026. After U.S. President Donald Trump delivered an erratic speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, threatening an ally's sovereignty and imposing sudden tariffs before reversing course within days, currency traders did something unprecedented. They fled the dollar. Within 72 hours, the dollar dropped from 10.8 Norwegian kroner to 9.63. That's a 12% devaluation in less than a week. For context, currency analysts consider a 5% quarterly swing to be significant volatility. This was a freefall. Norwegian state broadcaster NRK's financial correspondent Cecilie Langem-Becker wrote something that should terrify every American investor. When the world becomes uneasy, money usually streams towards the United States. Now the opposite is happening. Think about what that sentence means. The world no longer trusts America to protect their wealth. The currency that backs your paycheck, your mortgage, your retirement account, is losing its status as the global safe haven. But Norway isn't just watching this happen. They're actively preparing for a post-dollar world. And they're doing it with the largest sovereign wealth fund on the planet. Quick question before we go deeper. If you had $10,000 in savings right now, would you keep it in dollars or convert it to another currency? Drop your answer in the comments with your reasoning. I'm genuinely curious what you're thinking. The 21-trillion-krone question. Here's where this story gets massive. Norway's government pension fund Global, known colloquially as the oil fund, is worth approximately 21.27 trillion Norwegian kroner. That's roughly 2.15 trillion US dollars. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the GDP of Italy, Canada, or South Korea. This fund was built on decades of responsible oil revenue management. While other oil-rich nations spent their windfall on vanity projects and corruption, Norway invested every krone with a singular mission: secure pensions for future generations when the oil runs out. Currently, Norway has approximately 12.5 trillion kroner invested in American companies. That represents roughly 59% of the total fund's value parked in U.S. equities. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla. The fund owns chunks of corporate America. But now, Norwegian politicians are asking a dangerous question. Is America too risky? Greens party leader Arild Hermstad publicly demanded that Finance Minister Jens Stoltenberg evaluate selling off some of those American holdings. His argument is simple but devastating. If Trump's chaos continues, if American political stability erodes, if the dollar keeps sinking, Norway could lose hundreds of billions of kroner in valuation. Kier Knudsen, chief economist at Sparebank 1 Sør-Norge, went even further. He suggested Norway should use the oil fund as leverage against Trump's unpredictable policies. It's Trump who's politicizing everything, Knudsen told the newspaper Dagens Næringsliv. We should absolutely have a debate over how we invest in the oil fund. Think about that for a second. A major Norwegian bank economist is openly discussing using the world's largest sovereign wealth fund as a weapon against American economic policy. That's not financial planning. That's economic warfare. But here's the counterargument, and it reveals something crucial about Norwegian thinking. Several Norwegian officials, including Foreign Minister Espen Barth Eide, strongly oppose politicizing the oil fund. Their reasoning? The fund exists to protect future Norwegian retirees, not to play geopolitical chess. Introducing political risk to investment decisions could backfire catastrophically. Kirsti Hogland, chief economist at DNB Carnegie, Norway's largest financial services group, stated flatly, "I disagree strongly that using the oil fund is a means of asserting Norway's wealth." So Norway faces an impossible choice. Continue investing in an increasingly unstable America and risk losing trillions, or pull out and potentially destroy decades of financial strategy by politicizing the fund. This debate is actively playing out in Parliament, distorting it right now as we speak. What Norway knows that you don't. But let's zoom out and ask the deeper question. Why is this happening now? What changed in January 2026 that triggered this crisis of confidence? The answer isn't just Trump's behavior, though that's certainly a catalyst. The real story is structural. For years, economists have warned that America's combination of massive federal debt, political polarization, and declining institutional trust would eventually undermine the dollar's reserve currency status. As of today, February 2026, the U.S. national debt stands at $38.68 trillion. And here's the terrifying part. It's growing by approximately $1 trillion every 100 days. Think about that pace. By the time you finish watching this video, America will have added millions more to its debt burden. When Trump pressured Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to lower interest rates for political reasons, despite the Fed's supposed independence, he signaled to global investors that even America's most trusted institutions are vulnerable to political interference. Currency traders noticed. So did precious metals markets. Gold, silver, and platinum prices surged as investors sought alternatives to the dollar. This is textbook, flight from safety behavior. Meanwhile, Norway's krone strengthened not because Norway's economy suddenly boomed, but because the krone became comparatively safer than the dollar. That's a damning indictment of American economic credibility. Here's the hidden math you need to understand. When your currency weakens, everything you import becomes more expensive. Electronics, cars, clothing, fuel. If the dollar continues to decline, your purchasing power evaporates even if your salary stays the same. You're getting poorer without realizing it. Norway, by contrast, is experiencing the opposite. Their stronger currency means Norwegian citizens can buy more with each krone. Travel becomes cheaper. Imported goods cost less. It's a quality of life upgrade funded by American economic instability. Here's a specific scenario for you. If your grocery bill increased by 15% over the next 6 months purely because of dollar devaluation, not inflation, would that change how you vote or where you bank? Tell me in the comments because this is already happening in certain sectors. The Nordic alternative. So let's contrast this with the Norwegian system, because the differences reveal why Norway can weather economic storms that would devastate American households. First, currency stability. Norway's krone is backed by transparent sovereign wealth management and a diversified economy that extends far beyond oil. When global markets panic, Norway's disciplined fiscal policy acts as a stabilizer. Second, retirement security. Remember, the entire purpose of Norway's oil fund is to guarantee pensions for future generations. Every Norwegian citizen has a direct stake in that fund's success. It's not a political slush fund. It's a national retirement account worth over $2 trillion, managed with fiduciary responsibility. Compare that to the American system, where Social Security faces insolvency within decades, private 401k accounts are vulnerable to market crashes, and millions of Americans have zero retirement savings. If the dollar collapses, American retirees are exposed. Norwegian retirees are protected by a $2 trillion buffer. Third, political pressure on central banks. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be independent, but Trump's public attacks on Jerome Powell demonstrate that independence is fragile. Norway's central bank, Norges Bank, operates with genuine autonomy. When political leaders disagree with monetary policy, they don't publicly bully the central bank governor. This matters enormously for currency confidence. Investors trust that Norwegian interest rates and currency policy are set by professionals optimizing for economic stability, not by politicians optimizing for election cycles. Fourth, and this is crucial, the myth we need to dismantle: the belief that American financial dominance is permanent and inevitable. The myth of American financial invincibility. Many Americans assume the dollar will always be the world's reserve currency because it always has been. But always only means since 1944, when the Bretton Woods system established dollar dominance. That's 82 years. In the scope of economic history, that's a blip. Reserve currency status isn't a birthright. It's earned through consistent fiscal discipline, political stability, and institutional trust. When those erode, so does currency dominance. Ask the British Empire, whose pound sterling lost reserve status after World War II due to unsustainable debt and declining global influence. The warning signs are flashing red for America. A national debt racing past $38 trillion and accelerating by $1 trillion every 100 days. Political dysfunction that shut down the government multiple times in recent years. A president publicly undermining the central bank's independence. These are not characteristics of a stable reserve currency issuer. Norway understands this history. That's why they're diversifying away from dollar dependence. Not out of hostility to America, but out of fiduciary responsibility to their own citizens. The data doesn't lie. When Norway's finance ministry debates reducing U.S. exposure in the oil fund, they're not making a political statement. They're reading the same economic indicators available to everyone and drawing logical conclusions about risk management. Here's what that means for you personally. If the world's most sophisticated sovereign wealth fund, managing over $2 trillion and operated by some of the smartest financial minds on the planet, is considering reducing American exposure, maybe you should evaluate your own portfolio's dollar concentration. What this means for your future. So we've uncovered the hidden math behind Sell America. A weakening dollar that eroded from over 10 kroner to as low as 9.63 in a matter of days. A loss of global confidence in American economic stability. A Norwegian sovereign wealth fund worth $2.15 trillion debating whether America is too risky for long-term investment. And a contrast between Norwegian fiscal discipline and American economic chaos driven by debt growing at $1 trillion every 100 days. The open loop we established at the beginning can now be closed. Why is Norway abandoning the US dollar in 2026? Because Norway prioritizes long-term stability over short-term political convenience. Because Norwegian institutions are designed to protect citizen wealth across generations, not election cycles. And because the data suggests America's financial invincibility is a myth we can no longer afford to believe. This isn't about nationalism or rivalry. This is about acknowledging reality. The American dream increasingly requires an American income that keeps pace with currency devaluation, healthcare costs, housing inflation, and retirement insecurity. For many Americans, that math doesn't work anymore. The Norwegian alternative isn't perfect, but it's grounded in a fundamentally different philosophy. Wealth exists to serve citizens, not the other way around. Institutions should be protected from political interference. And long-term thinking should always triumph over short-term gain. If this investigation challenged your assumptions about American economic dominance, you're exactly who this channel is for. Nexora exists to explore the friction between the American dream and the Nordic reality with data, empathy, and uncomfortable honesty. We're building a community of people who want to understand the hidden systems that shape our quality of life. Subscribe now because next week, we're breaking down why Norwegian workers get 5 weeks of vacation while American workers get fired for taking sick days. You won't want to miss that. The uncomfortable truth. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. America's currency dominance is eroding in real time, and most Americans have no idea it's happening. You're working harder for dollars that buy less, saving for retirement in accounts vulnerable to currency collapse, and trusting institutions that are increasingly politicized and unstable. Meanwhile, Norway built a system that converts natural resource wealth into generational security. They didn't get lucky. They made intentional policy choices prioritizing long-term citizen welfare over short-term political wins. Finance Minister Jens Stoltenberg, who took office in February 2025, now faces the monumental task of navigating this crisis while protecting Norway's $2 trillion nest egg. You can't individually fix American currency policy or force your government to adopt Norwegian-style fiscal discipline. But you can make informed decisions about your own financial exposure. Diversify your savings. Understand currency risk. Question the assumption that the dollar's dominance is guaranteed forever. The economists and politicians debating Norway's oil fund strategy in the Storting it have access to the same information you do. They're just willing to act on it. The question is, are you? Here's your question of the day, and I want you to really think about this before you answer. If you could trade your current American financial system, with its $38 trillion debt growing by $1 trillion every 100 days, for Norway's model of sovereign wealth management, guaranteed pensions backed by $2 trillion and currency stability, but it meant paying higher taxes and accepting more government involvement in markets, would you make that trade? Drop your answer in the comments and explain your reasoning. Would you give up some personal financial autonomy for collective economic security? There's no right answer, but your perspective matters. And I'll be responding to comments for the next 2 hours, so let's have a real conversation about this. Before you go, I want to direct you to another video in our Norway vs. USA series that pairs perfectly with this one. It's called, Why Norwegian Millennials Are Richer Than American Boomers, and it breaks down the generational wealth transfer that's happening in Norway while American millennials drown in student debt. That video is linked in the description and in the end screen right now. This is Nexora. We explore the uncomfortable truths about wealth, work, and wellness that challenge everything you thought you knew about the American dream. If you found value in this investigation, share it with someone who still believes the dollar is invincible. They need to see this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the comments and in the next video.